The Snowden revelations, mass surveillance exposed. For decades, intelligence agencies assured the public that surveillance programs were narrowly focused on national security threats. Most people assumed that only suspected criminals or terrorists were monitored. But in 2013, a young intelligence contractor named Edward Snowden released thousands of classified documents that challenged those assumptions and sparked one of the biggest debates about privacy, government power, and digital freedom in modern history. The Snowden revelations exposed an extensive global surveillance system capable of collecting vast amounts of phone records, internet traffic, emails, and online communications. The disclosures revealed how intelligence agencies worked with technology companies, foreign governments, and telecommunications providers to gather information on an unprecedented scale. Supporters argued these programs helped prevent terrorism and protect national security. Critics claimed they represented a serious threat to civil liberties and personal privacy. This audiobook explores the story behind the leaks, from Snowden's career inside the intelligence community to the dramatic release of classified documents through investigative journalists. We'll examine the surveillance technologies that were uncovered, the legal and ethical questions they raised, and the international reaction that followed. You'll learn about programs such as PRISM, XKeyscore, and the collection of telephone metadata, while separating verified facts from common misconceptions. We'll also explore the ongoing debate between security and privacy in an increasingly connected world, where smartphones, social media, cloud storage, and artificial intelligence continue to reshape how information is collected and analyzed. Was Edward Snowden a courageous whistleblower who exposed unconstitutional surveillance, or did his actions compromise national security and intelligence operations? The answer depends greatly on perspective, and this audiobook presents the evidence, the arguments, and the lasting consequences from multiple viewpoints. Whether you're interested in government secrecy, cybersecurity, constitutional rights, intelligence agencies, or the future of digital privacy, the Snowden revelations, Mass Surveillance Exposed, offers a balanced examination of one of the most significant intelligence disclosures of the 21st century. By the end, you'll have a deeper understanding of how the revelations changed public awareness, influenced privacy laws around the world, and continue to shape the ongoing conversation about surveillance in the digital age. Part 1. Before the Leaks, A World Connected. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that nearly every digital action you performed during the day left behind a permanent trail. Every phone call, every email, every search, every social media message, every website you visited. Today, that idea doesn't sound particularly shocking, but rewind just 20 years, and the internet felt very different. People viewed email as the digital version of a private letter. Cell phones were simply phones. Search engines were tools for finding information, not potential records of your interests, beliefs, and habits. The internet was celebrated as the greatest communication revolution in history. It connected families, it fueled business, it transformed education, it made knowledge instantly accessible. Very few people stopped to ask an important question. Who else could see all of this information? As technology advanced, governments around the world recognized something that criminals and businesses already understood. Data has value. Not only commercial value, strategic value, intelligence value, national security value. The more information analysts possessed, the easier it became to identify patterns. Who talked to whom, when they communicated, where they traveled, who they met, what websites they visited, what topics interested them. Even without reading the content of a message, these digital footprints could reveal remarkable details about someone's life. This information became known as metadata. Often described as data about data, metadata includes details surrounding a communication rather than its actual contents. For example, a phone call's metadata might include the caller, the recipient, the time, the duration, and the location of both phones. An email's metadata could include the sender, recipient, subject line, date, and routing information. While it may sound harmless, experts often point out that metadata can reveal surprisingly intimate details about a person's relationships, routines, medical appointments, religious activities, political interests, and professional contacts. Long before Edward Snowden entered the public spotlight, governments had already begun adapting intelligence gathering to the digital age. Throughout the Cold War, surveillance focused primarily on radio transmissions, diplomatic communications, spies, and military intelligence. As computers became common during the 1980s and 1990s, intelligence agencies increasingly shifted toward digital networks. The arrival of the internet accelerated this transformation dramatically. Suddenly, billions of people were voluntarily creating enormous amounts of information every day. Every online purchase, every GPS location, every uploaded photograph, every search query, every message, every digital interaction created another piece of information. Collectively, these pieces formed an incredibly detailed picture of modern life. Then came an event that changed intelligence gathering forever. September 11th, 2001. The terrorist attacks against the United States fundamentally altered national security priorities. Nearly 3,000 people lost their lives. Governments faced enormous public pressure to prevent another attack. Intelligence agencies argued that they needed broader authority to detect hidden terrorist networks before violence occurred. Legislatures responded by expanding surveillance powers. In the United States, Congress passed the USA Patriot Act only weeks after the attacks. Supporters believed the legislation gave investigators essential tools to combat terrorism. Critics warned that some provisions granted government agencies sweeping surveillance authorities with limited public oversight. Similar debates emerged across many democratic nations. How much privacy should citizens sacrifice in exchange for greater security? Where should governments draw the line? Could mass data collection prevent future attacks, or would it gradually erode the very freedoms democratic societies were designed to protect? For years, these questions remained largely hidden from public view. Most intelligence programs operated under strict secrecy. Court approvals often occurred behind closed doors. Congressional oversight existed, but much of the discussion remained classified. Most citizens had little understanding of the scale or technical sophistication of modern surveillance. That would change dramatically in 2013. A relatively unknown contractor working inside the American intelligence community would decide that the public deserved to know far more about what was happening behind closed doors. His decision would ignite one of the most controversial intelligence disclosures in modern history. The name of that contractor was Edward Snowden. Part 2. Edward Snowden, from insider to whistleblower. Before his name became known around the world, Edward Snowden lived a life that, on the surface, appeared remarkably ordinary. He was born on June 21, 1983, in North Carolina, and grew up in a family with strong ties to the U.S. government. Several members of his family worked in federal service, and public service was viewed as both honorable and important. As a teenager, Snowden developed an intense interest in computers. Unlike many students who simply use computers, he wanted to understand how they worked. He taught himself programming. He explored computer networks. He learned about cybersecurity long before it became a mainstream profession. His technical skills quickly became apparent. Although he did not follow a traditional academic path, Snowden proved highly capable in the rapidly growing world of information technology. Following the September 11 attacks, like many young Americans, he felt a strong desire to contribute to his country's security. He briefly enlisted in the U.S. Army with the intention of joining the Special Forces, but an injury during training ended his military career before it truly began. Rather than abandoning government service, Snowden pursued another path. His expertise with computer systems led him into the intelligence community. He eventually worked in increasingly sensitive technical positions for both the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency, often through private contractors. These roles gave him access to highly classified computer networks and some of the world's most advanced intelligence systems. Unlike television spy dramas, much of Snowden's work involved computers rather than field operations. He managed secure systems, protected classified networks, supported intelligence analysts, maintained complex digital infrastructure. Over time, his responsibilities expanded, and he was granted high-level security clearances that allowed him to view information unavailable to nearly everyone else. He worked at facilities in the United States, Japan, and Hawaii. From these locations, he gained insight into how modern intelligence agencies collected and processed enormous amounts of digital information. According to Snowden's later statements, his concerns developed gradually rather than overnight. At first, he viewed surveillance programs as necessary tools to protect national security. But as he learned more about their scale and capabilities, he began questioning whether some activities extended beyond what the public believed was taking place. He later said he became troubled by the gap between official public statements and the classified programs he observed. Snowden believed that citizens in democratic societies should understand the extent of government surveillance so they could decide whether those powers were appropriate. Others strongly disagreed. Many current and former intelligence officials argued that employees entrusted with classified information have a legal and ethical obligation to protect it. If individuals disagree with government policies, they argued, there are internal channels through which concerns can be raised. By disclosing classified information publicly, critics say Snowden violated his oath, endangered intelligence operations, and potentially alerted hostile governments and terrorist organizations to methods that had taken years to develop. This disagreement remains one of the central controversies surrounding Snowden's actions. Did he act as a whistleblower, exposing matters of public importance? Or did he unlawfully disclose national security secrets? The answer often depends on legal interpretation, political philosophy, and personal views about government transparency. As Snowden weighed his decision, he understood the consequences could be severe. The disclosure of classified intelligence documents could lead to criminal prosecution under the U.S. Espionage Act. He could lose his career, his freedom, his home, perhaps even his future. Yet he later stated that remaining silent had become impossible for him. By early 2013, Snowden began quietly collecting documents that he believed demonstrated the true scope of government surveillance. Rather than releasing them directly online, he sought experienced investigative journalists who could examine the material, verify its authenticity, and decide what information should be published while withholding details that might unnecessarily endanger ongoing operations. This decision would shape how the story unfolded. Instead of a sudden flood of raw documents, the world would receive carefully reported investigations based on classified records. Within months, those reports would dominate international headlines. Governments would scramble to respond. Technology companies would face uncomfortable questions. Privacy advocates would celebrate unprecedented transparency. Intelligence agencies would warn of lasting damage to national security. And Edward Snowden would become one of the most recognizable and divisive figures of the 21st century. Part 3. The Journalists and the First Explosive Stories. By the spring of 2013, Edward Snowden had made his decision. He would not post thousands of classified documents online for anyone to read. Instead, he wanted experienced journalists to examine the material, verify its authenticity, consult with editors, and decide what information was in the public interest, while withholding details that could unnecessarily expose intelligence methods or endanger lives. To Snowden, this distinction mattered. He later argued that journalism provided an important layer of editorial judgment that a simple document dump could not. One of the first people he contacted was journalist Glenn Greenwald. Known for his reporting on civil liberties and government surveillance, Greenwald had frequently questioned the expanding powers of intelligence agencies after the September 11 attacks. Snowden also reached out to documentary filmmaker Laura Poitras, who had spent years reporting on national security issues and had herself experienced repeated scrutiny while traveling through U.S. airports. A third journalist, Ewan McCaskill of The Guardian, would soon join the reporting effort. Communicating through encrypted messages, Snowden revealed only limited information about himself. At first, the journalists knew very little about their mysterious source. They understood only that someone claiming to have extraordinary access to classified intelligence documents wanted to meet. Eventually, the team traveled to Hong Kong. There, inside a modest hotel room, they met the man who would soon dominate headlines across the globe. Edward Snowden was only 29 years old. Calm, soft-spoken, technically brilliant, he calmly explained why he believed the documents should become public. Filmmaker Laura Poitras recorded many of these conversations on camera, creating footage that would later appear in the Academy Award-winning documentary Citizen4. As reporters reviewed the classified material, they realized its significance almost immediately. The documents appeared authentic. They described surveillance capabilities far beyond what most members of the public understood. Editors faced difficult decisions. Publishing classified information carried legal, ethical, and national security implications. Every document had to be carefully reviewed. Names and operational details that could identify intelligence personnel or expose sensitive methods were considered for redaction before publication. Finally, on June 5, 2013, the first major story appeared. The article reported that the National Security Agency had been collecting telephone metadata from millions of customers through orders issued under the authority of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. The reports indicated that the collection involved records such as phone numbers, call times, and durations rather than recordings of conversations themselves. Nevertheless, the scale of the collection surprised many readers. The following day, an even larger revelation emerged. A classified presentation described a program known as PRISM. According to the published documents, PRISM allowed the NSA to obtain certain digital communications from major internet service providers under legal authorities targeting foreign intelligence. The disclosures quickly generated widespread public discussion, although there was significant disagreement over how the program functioned and what information was directly accessible. Some early media reports created the impression that intelligence agencies had unrestricted, direct access to company servers. Several technology companies publicly denied providing unrestricted access, stating that they responded only to lawful requests made under applicable legal processes. The distinction became an important part of the public debate. As more documents were published over the following weeks, a picture emerged of a highly sophisticated global surveillance system involving multiple collection methods, international intelligence partnerships, and advanced analytical tools. Many of the reported programs had never before been publicly acknowledged. Government officials reacted swiftly. Senior intelligence leaders defended the surveillance programs, arguing they had been authorized by law, overseen by courts and Congress, and designed primarily to detect foreign threats and prevent terrorist attacks. They maintained that the disclosures risked revealing valuable intelligence capabilities to adversaries. Privacy advocates viewed the revelations very differently. Civil liberties organizations argued that the disclosures demonstrated how surveillance authorities had expanded far beyond what many citizens understood. They questioned whether existing oversight mechanisms adequately protected constitutional rights and individual privacy. Public opinion became sharply divided. Some Americans praised Snowden for exposing information they believed citizens had a right to know. Others viewed him as someone who had violated national security laws and potentially endangered intelligence operations. The debate quickly spread beyond the United States. Governments around the world demanded explanations. International allies questioned whether their leaders and citizens had also been monitored. Technology companies faced growing pressure to explain how they handled government data requests. For the first time, millions of ordinary people began asking questions that had rarely entered public conversation. How much information does my phone collect? Who can access my emails? Can governments monitor internet activity without my knowledge? And just how much of our digital lives is truly private? The answers would become even more surprising as additional documents revealed powerful surveillance tools capable of searching enormous quantities of global internet traffic in ways few outside the intelligence community had ever imagined. Part 4. PRISM, XKeyscore, and the machinery of modern surveillance. As journalists continued examining Edward Snowden's documents, they discovered that the headlines published during the first week represented only a small portion of what the files contained. The documents described a complex network of surveillance systems. Some collected communications, others organized information, some searched enormous databases, others analyzed relationships between people, locations, and digital activity. Rather than one single surveillance program, the intelligence community operated numerous systems, each designed for specific purposes under different legal authorities. One of the most widely discussed programs was PRISM. The published documents indicated that PRISM enabled the National Security Agency to obtain certain electronic communications from U.S. technology companies under court-approved legal processes targeting foreign intelligence. The exact technical operation of PRISM became the subject of considerable public debate. Early reports led many people to believe intelligence agencies had unrestricted direct access to company servers. The companies involved publicly disputed that interpretation, stating they did not provide open or unlimited access to their systems and that they responded to lawful government requests as required by applicable law. Even with those clarifications, PRISM became one of the defining symbols of the Snowden disclosures. It raised a broader question that resonated around the world. How much personal information should governments be allowed to obtain from private technology companies? Another program revealed in the documents captured even greater public attention among cybersecurity experts. Its name was XKeyscore. Unlike PRISM, which focused on acquiring data under specific legal authorities, published documents described XKeyscore as a powerful analytical system that allowed authorized analysts to search and examine vast collections of internet-related data that had already been gathered through various intelligence collection methods. According to the released training materials, analysts could search using a wide range of identifiers, email addresses, usernames, IP addresses, telephone numbers, languages, web browsing activity, search terms, other digital identifiers. Supporters of intelligence collection argued that such tools were essential because the sheer volume of modern communications made manual analysis impossible. Sophisticated search systems allowed analysts to identify legitimate foreign intelligence targets far more efficiently. Critics, however, questioned whether systems with such extensive capabilities could adequately protect the privacy of innocent individuals. They worried that broad collection created opportunities for misuse, even if access was subject to internal rules and oversight. The documents also highlighted the importance of metadata. To many people, metadata initially sounded insignificant. After all, if the government wasn't listening to conversations, why should anyone worry? But privacy researchers explain that metadata can often reveal remarkably detailed patterns. Imagine examining 1 month's worth of someone's phone records. Without hearing a single conversation, you might identify where they work, who their closest friends are, which doctors they visit, whether they regularly contact a lawyer, if they attend a particular place of worship, when they travel, when they sleep, when they wake, and how frequently they communicate with certain individuals. In many cases, metadata creates a highly detailed map of a person's daily life. This realization surprised many members of the public. Information that once seemed harmless suddenly appeared far more revealing. The Snowden documents also described how intelligence agencies increasingly relied on automation. Modern surveillance no longer depended solely on human analysts listening to conversations. Powerful computers processed enormous quantities of digital information every second. Algorithms identified patterns. Software flagged unusual behavior. Analytical systems helped investigators connect seemingly unrelated pieces of information across multiple databases. This represented a fundamental shift in intelligence gathering. Rather than investigating a suspect first and collecting evidence later, technological advances made it possible to collect large volumes of data and search for connections afterward, subject to the legal authorities governing each program. Supporters argued that this approach was necessary in an era when terrorist organizations and foreign intelligence services communicated through global digital networks. Waiting until after an attack to gather evidence, they argued, could cost lives. Critics countered that collecting information on such a broad scale risked creating surveillance systems capable of monitoring ordinary citizens far beyond what democratic societies intended. These competing perspectives became central to the global conversation. The debate was no longer simply about one whistleblower. It had become a broader discussion about technology itself. Every smartphone, every laptop, every cloud service, every search engine, every social media platform. Each generated streams of digital information that could potentially become valuable for intelligence, law enforcement, or commercial purposes. The Snowden revelations forced governments, technology companies, legal scholars, and ordinary citizens to confront a reality that many had never fully considered. In the digital age, information had become one of the world's most valuable resources, and whoever could collect it, store it, and analyze it possessed extraordinary power. Part 5. The World Reacts: Shock, Debate, and Reform. As news stories based on the Snowden documents continued to appear throughout 2013, the reaction spread far beyond the United States. What had begun as a national story quickly became an international controversy. Governments demanded answers. Technology companies rushed to reassure customers. Civil liberties organizations called for sweeping reforms. Intelligence officials warned that serious damage had already been done. For many ordinary citizens, the revelations were deeply unsettling. People had long understood that governments conducted surveillance against foreign adversaries, but the disclosed documents suggested that modern intelligence gathering had expanded alongside the digital revolution, collecting and analyzing information on a scale few had imagined. News outlets around the world devoted weeks and eventually months to covering the disclosures. Television panels debated the balance between liberty and security. Newspapers published editorials from every point of view. Legal scholars examined constitutional questions. Technology experts explained how internet communications actually traveled across global networks. Privacy, once considered a niche issue for computer specialists, suddenly became a mainstream topic of conversation. One revelation attracted particular international attention. Published documents indicated that intelligence agencies had monitored communications involving foreign leaders and diplomatic institutions. Among the reported targets was the mobile phone of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The reports generated significant diplomatic tension. Merkel publicly expressed concern, reportedly stating that spying among friends is not acceptable. Other governments sought explanations about the surveillance of their officials, embassies, and citizens. Long-standing intelligence partnerships were subjected to increased public scrutiny. Inside the United States, lawmakers from both major political parties questioned intelligence officials during congressional hearings. Some argued that surveillance authorities had expanded beyond what Congress originally intended. Others defended the programs as lawful, carefully supervised, and essential to protecting the nation from terrorism and foreign espionage. The debate often revealed an important distinction. Most participants agreed that intelligence gathering was necessary. The disagreement centered on how much surveillance should occur, who should be subject to it, and what safeguards should exist to prevent abuse. Technology companies also found themselves under enormous pressure. Many feared that customers around the world would lose confidence in cloud services, email platforms, and online storage if they believed governments could easily access their information. In response, major technology firms began investing heavily in stronger encryption. Data traveling between company servers increasingly became encrypted. Secure messaging applications expanded. Browser security improved. The familiar HTTPS lock icon gradually became standard across much of the internet. While encryption had existed for years, the Snowden disclosures accelerated its widespread adoption. Cybersecurity became a business priority rather than simply a technical feature. Privacy itself became a selling point. Meanwhile, courts began examining some of the surveillance programs that had been revealed. Several legal challenges questioned whether the bulk collection of telephone metadata complied with constitutional protections and existing statutes. Different courts reached differing conclusions, reflecting the complexity of the legal issues involved. In 2015, the United States enacted the USA Freedom Act. Among other changes, the law ended one form of the NSA's bulk telephone metadata collection under Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act and introduced additional transparency and oversight measures. Supporters described the legislation as an important step toward restoring privacy protections. Critics argued that it did not go far enough, while others maintained that the reforms unnecessarily limited valuable intelligence capabilities. The international impact extended beyond legislation. Countries began reconsidering where digital information should be stored. Businesses examined data protection policies. Engineers redesigned systems to reduce unnecessary access to user information. Universities expanded research into cybersecurity and digital privacy. For many people, the Snowden revelations permanently changed how they thought about technology. The internet was no longer viewed simply as a collection of websites and social media platforms. It had become an immense infrastructure through which governments, corporations, advertisers, criminals, and ordinary users all interacted. Every click generated data. Every device created digital footprints. Every online service collected information in ways most users rarely considered. Whether one viewed Snowden as a whistleblower or a lawbreaker, there was little disagreement on one point. His disclosures fundamentally changed the global conversation about privacy, surveillance, and the responsibilities of governments in the digital age. The questions raised in 2013 continue to influence legislation, technology, and public debate today. And while governments work to address the political fallout, Edward Snowden himself faced an uncertain future. The man whose disclosures had shaken intelligence agencies around the world was now attempting to avoid arrest while seeking a place where he could remain free. Part 6: Escape, Exile, and a Life in Russia. As governments debated the surveillance programs revealed by Edward Snowden, the man at the center of the story found himself in an increasingly precarious position. After the first articles were published, Snowden remained in Hong Kong. His identity had become public. The mystery source who had supplied thousands of classified documents was no longer anonymous. He openly acknowledged that he had leaked the material and explained his reasons in several interviews. Snowden said he believed the public had a right to know about surveillance programs being conducted in its name. He also stated that he accepted the personal consequences of his decision. The United States government responded quickly. Federal prosecutors charged Snowden under the Espionage Act of 1917, along with charges related to the theft and unauthorized communication of classified government property. The charges did not focus on whether his motives were noble or harmful. Instead, they centered on the unauthorized disclosure of classified national defense information. Snowden's supporters argued that the Espionage Act was poorly suited to whistleblower cases because it does not generally allow defendants to argue that their disclosures serve the public interest as a legal defense. Critics countered that classified information must remain protected regardless of an individual's personal beliefs, and that employees entrusted with national security secrets cannot unilaterally decide what should be made public. With legal proceedings underway, Snowden sought to leave Hong Kong. In June 2013, he boarded a commercial flight bound for Moscow. The plan, according to various accounts, was for him to continue onward to another country that might grant him asylum. However, events unfolded differently. While Snowden was in transit, the United States revoked his passport. Without valid travel documents, he was unable to continue his journey. For weeks, Snowden remained inside the transit area of Moscow's Sheremetyevo International Airport. The unusual situation captured the attention of the global media. Television crews camped outside the airport. Journalists speculated daily about where he might go next. Several countries were mentioned as possible destinations. Some publicly declined to offer asylum. Others indicated that any request would need to follow established legal procedures. Eventually, Russia granted Snowden temporary asylum, allowing him to leave the airport. In later years, that temporary status evolved into a longer-term residency. He continued living in Russia while remaining wanted by U.S. authorities. His continued presence in Russia became another source of controversy. Supporters argued that he had few realistic alternatives after his passport was revoked, and that remaining in Russia was largely the result of circumstances beyond his control. Critics questioned whether living in a country often criticized for its own restrictions on press freedom and civil liberties undermined his message about transparency and human rights. Snowden has consistently stated that he did not choose Russia as his intended final destination, and that he became stranded there after losing his travel documents. The broader geopolitical context further complicated public perceptions. Relations between the United States and Russia were already strained. Snowden's presence in Moscow became part of wider diplomatic tensions, with American officials repeatedly requesting his return to face trial. Russia declined those requests. Over the years, Snowden continued to speak publicly through video conferences, interviews, books, and social media. He advocated for stronger digital privacy protections, wider use of encryption, and greater transparency regarding government surveillance. In 2019, he published his memoir, Permanent Record, describing his early life, intelligence career, and the events leading to the disclosures. The book became an international bestseller and reignited debates over his legacy. In 2020, Russian authorities granted Snowden permanent residency. Then, in 2022, he was granted Russian citizenship. The decision generated renewed criticism from those who viewed him as a fugitive from American justice, while supporters argued that years of exile had left him with limited practical options for building a stable life. Today, Edward Snowden remains one of the most polarizing figures of the modern information age. To some, he is a principled whistleblower who exposed government activities the public had a right to understand. To others, he is a former intelligence contractor who unlawfully disclosed classified information and damaged national security. Regardless of which perspective one accepts, there is little doubt that Snowden's actions altered the global discussion about surveillance, privacy, and the relationship between citizens and the state. His personal journey, from intelligence contractor to international fugitive and long-term exile, is inseparable from one of the most consequential intelligence controversies of the 21st century. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the Snowden revelations lies not in the fate of one man. Rather, it is in the enduring question they force the world to confront. In an age where nearly every aspect of life is digital, how much privacy should any of us expect? Part 7. Privacy versus Security, the debate that changed the digital age. The Snowden revelations did more than expose classified surveillance programs. They forced society to confront one of the most difficult questions of the modern era. How do we protect both national security and individual privacy? Unlike many political debates, this one has no simple answer. Both sides present compelling arguments. Both claim to be protecting fundamental values, and both warn of serious consequences if the balance shifts too far in the opposite direction. From the perspective of intelligence agencies, the world changed dramatically after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Modern threats no longer came only from hostile governments with large military forces. Small terrorist organizations, cybercriminals, foreign intelligence services, hackers, and extremist networks all began using the internet to recruit members, share information, coordinate attacks, and conceal their activities. Traditional investigative techniques often struggled to keep pace. Supporters of surveillance argue that intelligence agencies must detect threats before lives are lost. Waiting until after an attack has occurred is simply too late. From this viewpoint, collecting large amounts of digital information allows analysts to identify suspicious patterns that might otherwise remain invisible. A single intercepted communication may reveal very little, but when combined with travel records, financial transactions, phone metadata, and online activity, investigators may uncover connections capable of preventing serious crimes or acts of terrorism. Supporters also point out that surveillance programs generally operate within legal frameworks established by governments, courts, and legislatures. They argue that intelligence agencies are not acting independently, but under authorities created through democratic processes and subject to oversight, even if much of that oversight occurs in classified settings. Critics, however, see significant risks. History provides many examples of governments expanding powers during times of crisis. Emergency measures introduced for one purpose sometimes remain long after the original emergency has passed. Civil liberties advocates warn that surveillance systems created to combat terrorism could eventually be used for purposes never originally intended. Political monitoring, suppression of dissent, tracking journalists, or collecting information about ordinary citizens who have committed no crime. Another concern centers on the sheer scale of modern technology. Today's smartphones constantly generate location information. Fitness watches monitor health data. Smart televisions connect to the internet. Voice assistants respond to spoken commands. Vehicles transmit diagnostic information. Online shopping platforms record purchasing habits. Streaming services track viewing preferences. Social media companies collect interactions, interests, and social networks. Much of this information is gathered not by governments but by private corporations. These companies often collect data to improve services, personalize advertising, detect fraud, or analyze customer behavior. Yet the existence of these enormous databases raises another important question. If companies possess detailed information about billions of people, under what circumstances should governments be able to request access? The Snowden disclosures intensified discussions about encryption. Encryption converts information into coded data that can be read only by authorized users possessing the proper digital keys. Banks rely on it. Hospitals depend on it. Businesses use it to protect trade secrets. Ordinary people use it every day without realizing it whenever they see the small padlock icon in a secure web browser. Following the Snowden revelations, technology companies accelerated the deployment of stronger encryption across email systems, messaging platforms, cloud storage, and smartphones. Privacy advocates praised these improvements. Law enforcement agencies, however, expressed concern. Investigators warned that stronger encryption could make it far more difficult to access evidence during criminal investigations, even with valid court orders. This disagreement became known as the going dark debate. Should technology companies design systems that even they cannot unlock, or should governments require some form of lawful access under carefully controlled circumstances? Neither option satisfies everyone. Perfect privacy can complicate legitimate investigations. Unlimited government access risks abuse. The challenge lies in balancing competing values. Adding to the complexity is the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence. Modern AI systems can analyze enormous quantities of information far more quickly than any human analyst. They can recognize patterns, summarize communications, detect anomalies, and connect seemingly unrelated pieces of data. Supporters believe these capabilities strengthen national security and improve efficiency. Critics caution that AI-assisted surveillance could dramatically increase the ability to monitor individuals if not governed by clear laws, independent oversight, and strong accountability. The questions raised by Snowden in 2013 therefore remain highly relevant today. If anything, they have become even more important. Technology continues to evolve, data collection continues to expand, artificial intelligence continues to grow more capable. And societies around the world continue searching for the right balance between protecting public safety and preserving the personal freedoms that many democratic nations consider fundamental. The debate is far from over. It is evolving alongside every new technological breakthrough. And with each passing year, the decisions made by governments, companies, and citizens will help determine what privacy means for future generations. Part 8. Snowden's Legacy. A world forever changed. More than a decade has passed since Edward Snowden first handed classified documents to investigative journalists. Yet the questions raised by those disclosures remain as relevant today as they were in 2013. Technology has continued to evolve. Artificial intelligence now assists with data analysis. Cloud computing stores enormous amounts of personal information. Billions of people carry smartphones capable of recording their location, communications, purchases, and daily routines. The digital world has become even more interconnected, and so has the debate about privacy. Regardless of whether one views Snowden as a hero or a criminal, few dispute that his actions permanently changed public awareness. Before the revelations, surveillance was often viewed as something that happened only to spies, criminals, or foreign governments. After 2013, many people realized that ordinary digital activity also generated valuable information. Privacy became a mainstream topic. Newspapers devoted extensive coverage to cybersecurity. Schools introduced lessons on digital safety. Businesses promoted secure communications. Governments faced increasing public pressure to explain how intelligence programs operated and what safeguards existed to protect civil liberties. Technology companies also changed. End-to-end encryption became standard on many messaging platforms. Internet traffic increasingly shifted toward encrypted connections. Operating systems added stronger security features. Users became more aware of password managers, two-factor authentication, encrypted backups, and virtual private networks. Although these technologies were already being developed, many experts believe the Snowden disclosures accelerated their adoption. The relationship between governments and technology companies also entered a new phase. Requests for user data became the subject of greater public scrutiny. Many companies began publishing transparency reports showing how often governments requested customer information and how they responded within the law. These reports gave the public a clearer understanding of the legal processes involved, even though many details of intelligence operations necessarily remained classified. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies adapted. Officials have stated that the disclosures required significant changes to operational methods, communication practices, and security procedures. Some argue these changes made intelligence work more difficult and reduced visibility into foreign threats. Others contend that the reforms strengthened public trust by encouraging clearer oversight and more transparent legal frameworks. The long-term impact is still debated among intelligence professionals. Legal scholars continue to examine the constitutional questions raised by the surveillance programs. Privacy advocates continue pushing for stronger protections. Law enforcement agencies continue emphasizing the need for effective investigative tools. Technology companies continue balancing customer privacy with legal obligations. Each perspective reflects genuine concerns. The discussion has therefore become less about one individual and more about the broader challenges of governing digital societies. Snowden himself remains an enduring symbol of that debate. To supporters, he demonstrated that a single individual could reveal information powerful institutions preferred to keep secret. They see him as a whistleblower who encouraged democratic debate about government surveillance. To critics, he violated the trust placed in him, disclosed highly classified intelligence, and potentially assisted hostile governments by exposing sensitive capabilities. They argue that decisions about classified programs should be made through lawful oversight, not by individual contractors acting independently. These competing interpretations are unlikely to disappear. History often judges controversial figures differently over time. Some are remembered as visionaries, others as cautionary examples. Many remain subjects of debate for generations. Edward Snowden may ultimately fall into that final category. His legacy depends not only on the documents he released, but also on how future societies choose to balance freedom, security, accountability, and technological power. Perhaps the greatest lesson from the Snowden revelations is that technology itself is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. The same digital systems that help doctors save lives, enable families to communicate across continents, support scientific research, and power the global economy, can also be used for surveillance, espionage, cybercrime, and political influence. The tools are neutral. How they are governed is a human choice. As citizens, policymakers, engineers, and judges continue shaping the digital future, the questions first brought into the public spotlight in 2013 remain unanswered. How much privacy should individuals expect? How much surveillance should governments conduct? Who should oversee those powers? And how can democratic societies ensure that security measures remain consistent with the freedoms they seek to protect? These are not questions with permanent answers. They will evolve alongside every technological advance, every new communication platform, every artificial intelligence system, every generation that inherits an increasingly connected world. Whether history ultimately remembers Edward Snowden as a whistleblower, a leaker, or something in between, his revelations transformed one undeniable reality. The conversation about digital privacy had begun, and it is far from over.